Hello, welcome to another Mundane Monday. I'm Sally Ducharme. A chart I've been looking at quite a bit this past week is a chart of Lionel or Leo Messi, the Argentinian football star who led his team to World Cup victory last December. He's been in the news a bit because there's a lot of question around what he's going to do next, what his future looks like. What do you do after you've reached a mountaintop is always a big question. So let's take a look at his chart and see what explains his extraordinary speed and skill and ability to just hang on through very difficult circumstances. So it's a good fast way into a chart. And notice this is a time chart, so we can work with the houses and the angles. But notice a very quick way into a chart sometimes is to look at the primary benefic in the chart. And because he was born at night, see the sun is below the horizon, we look at that Venus. And so where is Venus but in the fifth house, which rules, among other things, sports and games. Venus there in Gemini would be, somebody who likes to be dexterous and likes to be very mental when they play games. He's very brilliant, at figuring out where people are going to be 3 moves down the field and creating an open space so that he can move through. So he brings that mental agility as well as his physical agility to the game. But this Venus is also doing something else that's really nice in his chart. Notice that it rules his midheaven. He's got his midheaven is in Libra. And so he has Venus is kind of a distance, but it's applying to trine eventually that midheaven. And so Venus ruling the midheaven from the house of good fortune, the fifth house, is a really positive, beneficent force in his chart. Also notice that midheaven is in his 9th house. It hasn't moved into the 10th yet. And so that tells us that he would find success maybe away from his homeland in a foreign country. And he did, as a young teenager, go to Spain from his home in Argentina to play because the opportunities were better for him there. And notice also, if we look at the primary light in his chart, that primary light is the moon because he was born at night. And the moon joins Venus and is also applying to trine his midheaven. So bringing that emotion and that love of the game, that emotional connection to the game, very important in his chart. And then also you think, well, what is ruling these really sweet Gemini planets? And you think, well, Mercury, which is next door in Cancer, ruling it. But notice that it has a special little secret power with the moon, in that Mercury is in the moon sign and the moon is in Mercury sign. And so they have a real connection, kind of a secret type of, I guess collaboration you would call it. That's not readily available when you look at the chart, but when you look at it more closely, you say, oh, okay. So all of his excitement and light he brings to the game very much being helped by that Venus in Cancer, which gives him more quickness and more speed with the moon there, and also adding to his ability to work mentally as well as physically on the field. And notice this Mercury is also applying to a conjunction to that Mars in the 6th house. And I would argue that without that Mars there, he probably wouldn't have risen to as great a heights, because Mars there gives him the ability to work very hard. You think of Mars in Cancer, which is a fallen Mars, but it's in the house of its own joy. And so he's able to power through some very difficult circumstances and even overcome some health challenges. And in fact, he did, as a young person, have some very significant health challenges. And I think we can see that in the placement of his chart's ruler, Saturn, because he's Aquarian rising, in opposition to that Venus and moon in his fifth house. When he was young, he just was not growing at a normal rate. And so he would need some growth hormones, which he lived in a fairly small town in Argentina. The medical treatment just wasn't available to him. He would have to go to a city, and it was very expensive. And so as a teenager, I think he might have been even 12 or 13, he received an offer from a club in Barcelona, a football club in Barcelona, to bring him to Spain to train him. And they also agreed that they would provide him with the medical assistance he needed, so that he did eventually grow at a normal pace, even though today I think he's still on the slight side. I think about 5'9". Some other footballers have complained that he's so small that you go to, contact him on the field and he's gone. So he's very quick, very fast. But you see with that Saturn there, someone who's able to overcome and to have that kind of grit to hang in there through very difficult circumstances. Also, we think of that Saturn for a public person is in the house of their audience or their fans. And while, he's enjoyed amazing fan support all over the world, there's always put on him this very heavy expectation. And people are very vocal when they don't feel that he's met their expectations. And so I think his career, even though he has this joy and love of the game, he's carried a lot of responsibility too as a player, because he does have such high expectations. And in fact, in this past World Cup, which they won, that was after quite a few disappointments in World Cups in the past, of not being quite where he wanted to be in the team, not performing as well as expected. And also you think about the 11th house being your teammates. And another obstacle that he's encountered as a football player is that he is so good and so skilled that the rest of the team around him tends to just kind of give him the ball and lean on him to score all the goals. And so you can see how that Saturn in Sagittarius, is somebody who loves to roam, and Sagittarius, someone who loves to roam and go free. And then when Saturn's there, you have that restriction put on your movements and ability to get around. And so just very heavy expectations put on Leo Messi as he's played. But also, again, he's able to hang in there and work very hard to reach a goal. I think there is even one point in 2016 when he was ready to retire, and he just kind of dug down and came up with that renewed energy and was able to power on, he won in 2022. So 6 years past that point when he was at really low ebb. Also, another thing in the chart is Jupiter right here at his IC. And you think about his homeland, where he grew up in Argentina, very much town is into football. Boys from the time, or I hope now, but girls too, by the time they're little are out in the street playing with each other. There's wonderful resources to kind of help boys and girls develop as football players. And so you can see the beneficence of that Jupiter in Aries, that he grew up in an environment that encouraged sport. And his father was also instrumental in encouraging him. In fact, it was his father, who underwent the process of applying to get him to Spain and went with him to support him as he grew as a football player. So it's interesting too that Jupiter in Aries, staying very close to his IC, he's lived many, many years away from home. He's played in basically European countries, and then he comes back to Argentina to play in the national team when they're competing in the World Cup. But yet, even though he's lived at a distance, and Jupiter with the IC could show that you live far away from home, he's maintained that strong connection with his homeland. He still has, I think, businesses. His family lives there. He goes back to visit frequently. He has good friends that he played soccer or played football with as a boy that he's still very much connected to. So this Jupiter in Aries with the IC shows that whenever a planet is close to an angle, it operates very powerfully in one's life. And notice too that Jupiter is in square to that Mars. So you can see it was his health concerns as a boy that he needed growth hormones he couldn't afford. That really was the catalyst for sending him overseas to live and work in another country. So this is the Hellenistic challenge here. We've looked at all the 7 traditional planets, and it always amazes me how rich they are as symbols. But let's complete the picture by looking at the outer planets and what they're doing in his chart as well. And so when we bring in Uranus, you see he was born at that time when Uranus and Saturn were close to each other in Sagittarius. And so that Saturn, which is put such heavy responsibility on him from his fans and from his teammates, also shows that Uranus is there, kind of elevating his status among his fans, bringing that sort of electricity and excitement to who he is internationally. And then lots of ups and downs, you think, with Uranus, with Saturn, especially in a sign like Sagittarius. So just kind of highs and lows, a roller coaster in his career. And then also we're looking at Uranus we talked about the importance of his homeland. Uranus then is in a nice trine to that Jupiter. So enhancing that love he has of the people he grew up with, his family, how much they help him, and have really been his greatest fans. In fact, I think a lot of his family members work for him today. And so we've got, in a sense, then, a really great Uranus in his chart, really lighting up some already very positive images. If we look at Neptune, we see this is an interesting, we haven't talked yet about his Cancer sun yet, and that Cancer sun certainly helps explain, his love of family and his connection with his homeland. But notice that it's in opposition to his Neptune, and from the 6th house to the 12th house. And so this tells us this is someone, especially with a 12th house connection, who might be a little more retiring, needs to have his time when he retreats. And I know one of his doctors recently said, Leo, he's not shy, but he's introverted. And he's just a person who needs to have his time with just a small group of people that he trusts, or even by himself, or his own little nuclear family. That's essential to him. For him to shine and to work and to do his job as a football player, he really needs to go to that 12th house and retreat and have that time when he can withdraw. And notice also that he's got that is in Capricorn too, which brings that sort of sense of, I just need to put walls around myself once in a while. But yet it's in Neptune, being so porous, he has trouble doing that in his highly public life. So I think sometimes he's put people off a bit, thinking he was standoffish when actually he was just needing to rest and recharge. And then finally, let's look at that Pluto. And of course, a planet that goes into the 10th house at the top of the chart is always going to call attention to itself. It's going to show that he's someone who's going to galvanize people around him, that Scorpio Pluto especially, that he walks on the field and he takes control type of energy. And so I think that Pluto is also in square to his ascendant descendant in the chart. So that can reinforce the idea too that even though he's this very powerful public figure, it doesn't always sit comfortably with him, that he has a need to kind of shrug it off. You think of an Aquarius rising, being someone who likes to be independent, doesn't like people, constantly following him around all the time, telling him what he should do. And that descendant too, that wants to have these wonderful relationships one-on-one with people, and can sometimes find that his public persona gets in the way of that. So Pluto here, kind of a mixed blessing in his chart. So what lies ahead then? Oh, and also then, of course, one other thing for this Pluto is it's doing such a sweet thing in his chart too. It's trining the sun. Sometimes you think, well, a sixth house planet, it has to try hard. It doesn't always get noticed because it's in aversion to the ascendant. But when a sixth house planet connects with a 10th house planet, or in the case of this Mars with the midheaven, then you've got a really powerful planet that his work, his efforts, all of those long years of training are going to pay off in amazing public success in his chart. And the sun is applying to that trine, which gives it more power. So what lies ahead for Leo Messi? We've got, I think at this point he's still playing, but deciding which team to play for in the upcoming season. But one thing that we can see that's happening in his chart is that Pluto is just entering the sign of Aquarius, and it's going to be going back and forth over that point for the next couple of years. And Pluto not everyone has Pluto crossing their ascendant because it moves so slowly. And so it's a very remarkable aspect when it does occur. And so I would think that he's going to be undergoing a situation where he's going to be reinventing himself over the next couple of years, that as he's kind of aging out of being able to play football, that he'll be looking for other avenues that he can explore. This fifth house is going to stay very strong in his chart. That love of the game, that emotional connection he has with it. And Gemini, you think, can be the teacher. So I would not be surprised as Pluto moves more and more and more into Aquarius over the next, I think it's going to be 20 years, but definitely within the next decade, it will reach a trine to that Venus. And so I think we're going to see him emerge as maybe a coach or a trainer or someone who establishes organizations that are going to help young people develop and grow as football players. I think given the promise of that fifth house, his enjoyment of young people, his enjoyment of the sport, and Pluto coming along to give that a lot more power and emphasis, I think that's lies in his future. I think the next couple of years, probably a difficult time. Pluto crossing your ascendant, not easy because, something has to be let go before we can bring in something new. And so I think he'll be undergoing that process in the next couple of years. But in any case, it's been an absolute joy watching him play. And I wish him and, of course, his wonderful family all the very best in the future. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye.